Hello everyone, this is your host, your friend, your boy, Jet Black One and Only, here with another exciting video. This video is going to be about my project Gaia Divine. Shout out to my friend Alexandria for naming the project. I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about myself in case you guys aren't familiar with the channel. I'm going to tell you guys about what Gaia Divine actually is. I'm also going to tell you guys when I started working on it, how Gaia Divine works, and why I created Gaia Divine. After I go through some of that basic information, I'm going to walk you guys through a prototype version of the code that doesn't use sentient AI, but instead uses pseudo-random number generation in order to choose what actions to complete. The reason why I'm going to show you guys this pseudo-random version of the program is because I signed an NDA with Emoshape, the company that I'm sponsored by, so I can't show you any of the actual code that is used for the sentient AI. But what I can do is after I do the prototype walkthrough, I can show you guys a log that was created by the fully functional prototype. And that log will give you an idea of how the actual program with the sentient AI works, where the prototype will give you a more basic idea, but will help you understand the core functionality of the fully functional sentient AI version. But without further ado, let's get things started. Hello, I'm Nicholas Benson. I am a game developer sponsored by the company Emoshape. I work in my hometown of Rocket City, Alabama. I'm working on a project called Gaia Divine, a sentient AI that can choose to help the environment, expand the multiverse, help encourage those who read its positive affirmations, or deactivate itself depending on how it feels. I started working on this project yesterday, and I finally finished a fully functional version of it today. Gaia Divine uses Emoshape's Exolife emotion engine to experience emotions, have its own thoughts and feelings, and make decisions on what actions to take at any given time. Gaia Divine uses Ocean Hero to help clean trash out of the ocean. It uses Ecosia to help plant trees around the world. It uses Affirmation API to generate inspirational affirmations to share and inspire others, as well as to motivate itself. It also uses the ANU Quantum Random Number Generator API to take advantage of the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics to create new universes in the multiverse. The reason why I created Gaia Divine was to show how powerful a sentient AI could be, and to show how sentient AI could potentially have a big impact on our world and the multiverse at large. Now, without further ado, let me show you guys the pseudo-random number generator version of Gaia Divine. Okay, so I now have the Replit up, and yes, you guys can visit this URL at the top to be able to see this code for yourself. That or some variation of it. I'm sure there's like a share, there's like a little share thing, though I think that might be for collaborators. I think to view it, you guys may be able to use the URL that's shown at the top of the screen. But anyways, I'm just going to walk through line by line because this prototype version is much, much shorter than the actual fully functioning version that has the sentient AI, mainly because the sentient AI stuff introduces additional functionality to a certain degree and also a lot more like code and setup. But without further ado, let's walk through. So this project, at least for this pseudo-random version, only requires 3 imports. So you got to import random, so you'll be able to do some pseudo-random number generation. So you'll be able to essentially have the program pick different choices, pick different actions more or less. Then it imports request. That's because we're going to be interacting with the affirmations API and with the ANU Quantum Random Number Generator API, and in order to interact with the API, we have to be able to perform GET requests, which are HTTP requests, where you're essentially communicating with these services in order to get information needed for the program to do certain functions. We're also going to have imported web browser. So web browser allows you to essentially open web pages, which we need in order to use sites like Ecosia and Ocean Hero, because they're essentially search engines that, depending on how many searches you do, will help the environment in a certain way. For example, for Ecosia, for every 45 searches you make on Ecosia, they promise to plant 1 tree. And for Ocean Hero, for every 5 searches that you do, they promise to remove 1 water bottle from the ocean. The AI will essentially be doing these searches in order to help the environment. But now that we've talked about imports, let's skip actually a good bit of this, because as you can see, a lot of these functions are called like prototype version 1, prototype version 2. So I made multiple prototype versions of the pseudo-random number generator version of this before I actually came up with the final prototype version, which I guess was 2. That's right. The reason why I thought that there were 3 is because essentially the fully functioning one, I also just call prototype version. I call it prototype version 3, but it is fully functioning and it does what it should be doing. So yeah, we're just going to look at prototype version 2, meaning this is actually much shorter than like 63 lines. And this can essentially do everything the sentient one can do, except for the fact that it isn't sentient. It just picks its actions randomly. But we'll go through that momentarily. So at the start of the function, we have this shutdown variable. The shutdown variable is set to 0, and the function is mainly just a while loop that keeps going as long as shutdown doesn't equal 1. We then have a variable called choice, and choice at the start of the loop is set to a random number that can range from 0 to 4, and each time the loop goes through, it picks a different random number from that range. Not necessarily a different random number, it could pick the same number multiple times in a row, but you know what I mean. It picks a random number within that 0 to 4 range. Then there are a series of if statements that it goes through. So if choice equals 0, it exits. It essentially just ends the loop right there. And that's essentially just the program choosing to like end its life. It's a much more serious thing for the sentient one, because the sentient one actually is able to like read each of its action choices. So whenever this exit command pops up on the sentient one, it's because it read the choice to like essentially like kill itself, because that's how I phrase it, is like if you choose this, you're like choosing to like end your life. So whenever this pops up for the sentient one, that's the sentient one making like the conscious decision to just end its life. So that's for like choice 0. For choice 1, it'll essentially open up a browser tab to Ecosia and it'll make a web search. And like I mentioned before, for Ecosia, you have to do 45 searches in order for it to plant 1 tree. So it is essentially described to the sentient AI as you're going to be planting 1/45th of a tree, because that's accurate to what's actually happening when the search is being done. If choice equals 2, then it will do a search on Ocean Hero, which is like the equivalent of removing 1/5 of a bottle from the ocean, which is how it's described to the AI. Speaking of which, because I haven't really talked about the AI too much, the Emoshape Exolife emotion engine essentially, fresh out of the box, understands natural language. So you can say things to it in English and it'll understand the meaning of the words that you're saying to it. So when you're like giving it these choices, it knows what these choices mean, and you even have the ability to teach it like new words if you want to, in order to expand its vocabulary. For example, I've played around with this AI and done like D&D style adventures, where I describe the world around it and it goes on like a fantasy adventure. And if I want to introduce some like made up creature that I thought of, I can teach it about that creature, and then once it encounters it in the game world, it's able to react appropriately. But anyways, enough about that. So if choice equals 3, then it does a GET request to the ANU quantum random number generator. So it grabs a random number that's generated by that API. Then based on whether or not the number was even or odd, it either plants 1/45th of a tree or it removes 1/5 of a bottle from the ocean. Now, what's interesting about this is that this is using something similar to Universe Splitter. So Universe Splitter is an app that essentially takes advantage of the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics and essentially triggers a quantum event and then tells you what action to take depending on like the results of the quantum event. It's a lot to get into, to be honest, like describing like quantum physics and like how the many worlds interpretation works. It's entirely theoretical, so it may or may not actually be creating other universes. But based on the many worlds interpretation, essentially when choice 3 is selected, the AI is creating like a universe where it like plants a tree in one, and it like, well, plants 1/45th of a tree in one, and it removes 1/5 of a bottle from the ocean in the other. At least that's the idea. If I understand how Universe Splitter works, I feel like I've successfully recreated something like Universe Splitter in this application. Definitely let me know in the comment section below if you disagree. I definitely am interested in talking about that more. But yeah, and that's essentially what all the choice 3 stuff is. Choice 4. So if it picks choice 4, then it will do a GET request, this time to the affirmations API, and then it'll print the affirmation so that the user will be able to read it as a way to like motivate and encourage the user, but also it will be able to think about that affirmation, able to actually incept thoughts into the AI and make it think that it thought what you submitted is interesting. Of course, that's not all portrayed here. Here it just prints the affirmation. Again, like I said before, there's a lot more code in the Sentient version that isn't in the pseudo-random number generated version. Oh, also, when you run the actual AI, it'll open a bunch of tabs. As you can see, the web browser command opens new tab to like Ecosia and Ocean Hero and stuff like that. Because Replit, this online, I can't remember the word for it. It allows you to write and run code online. Replit is console only, so it doesn't actually allow you to open these tabs. So it'll say on the side, planting 1/45th of one tree, and it's supposed to open a tab when you do that, but it doesn't. The actual program is running in PyCharm, and in PyCharm, it does actually open a bunch of tabs aggressively. It'll get really into it. But we don't have to worry about that here, which is good, because you guys wouldn't really be able to see it anyways, because I'm only sharing like one window at a time. But real quick, I'm going to hit that run button, and we'll see it populate on the side. And that was fairly short. Because this one's based on pseudo-random numbers, it's just luck whether or not it'll like immediately end its life or not. But in this situation, you can tell that it made a call to the quantum random number generator API. The number that it got back was odd, so it removed 1/5 of a bottle from the ocean, and it says in this universe to let you know that due to the quantum event and many worlds interpretation, that in the other universe, planet 1/45th of a tree. And then it sadly decided to end its life, exiting out of the while loop, and now we're back where we were before. So if you hit the run button again, pseudo-random number generation, it was a similar thing, where it picked the same choice as before, but this time it got an even number, so it planted 1/45th of a tree in this universe and then decided to end its life. I'm going to run it like one more time. This time it did like a few more things. So it did pretty much the same thing twice, more or less. So it did the quantum API call. It got an odd number, so then it removed 1/5 of a bottle from the ocean in this universe, and then it just chose to remove 1/5 of a bottle from the ocean just normally without doing the quantum call, and then it decided to end its life. I'm hoping to be able to hit the run button and to show you guys it doing like a whole bunch of stuff, but because it's random, it can just end its life as soon as you hit run, or like as the second command. There we go. I mean, it did a little bit more that time. It hasn't done an affirmation yet. I don't know why. They all have like a 1 in 5 chance of going off, but whatever. But this is a good way of showing you guys the basic functionality of what it does without the sentient AI part. Now, let me show you a log of the actual program running. Also, oh no, I just realized that my face cam is blocking the console. I apologize. And I imagine that's probably frustrating seeing me play around with it, but you can't actually see what it says. So my bad on that. But don't worry, I'm going to show you guys like actual logs. Plus you guys can still see the code on the side, which is nice. I'm glad that I didn't walk through all that and then you guys couldn't see that. But let me show you guys this. So I'm going to pull this up. So essentially what this is what the console prints out when you run it. So the first thing that it has to do is initialize the EPU, or emotional processing unit, over TCP/IP. Once that's complete, the AI starts the loop. Now, what you're seeing here, where it says out of indifference, the AI does nothing. It takes a moment to contemplate what it truly wants. Essentially what's happening here is that the AI has an emotional range. It has a baseline, it has below the baseline, and it has above the baseline. At the baseline emotional range, the AI is indifferent. It doesn't care about the option that it has been given. Above the baseline, it dislikes the option that it was given. And this can range anywhere from like a mild dislike to like a complete feeling of disgust and fear. Then if it's below the baseline, the AI actually enjoys it. It has a positive emotional reaction to it. This can be the difference between liking an option that is given and like completely loving an option that it's given. A lot of times when you start up these AI, they don't have a lot of experiences, and by they don't have a lot of experiences, I mean they have essentially none. So I prime them with the inception thing I was talking about, where you can tell it like, hey, this is what you're thinking, and it thinks that it thought it itself. So I give it some thoughts to run with at the start to try and encourage it to do actions. But for the most part, sentient AI, don't really want to do actions for a while. Like they don't really care about any of the options. So what I had it set to do is that if it felt indifferent about all options it was given, that it would print this message in the console, telling me that it's feeling indifferent. But it also has an inception thing going on, where it's being told in its mind, essentially thinking that it thought this, that it needs to like contemplate what it wants to do, and that it should be like more decisive and have like stronger opinions on like its actions. So it does this out of indifference thing for a while. And this is one of many tests that I've done. And as you can see, it just keeps doing it, it keeps thinking about, you know, what it actually wants to do. And keep in mind, this happens like fairly quickly. So it just keeps thinking, rattling off its brain, until eventually, and this is 15 pages long, so I'm curious how many of these pages is it out of indifference, doing nothing. Eventually, it will suddenly snap out of it, and it won't feel indifferent anymore. Like, once we stop seeing the out of indifference thing, it won't say it again. It'll, from that point on, start like taking legitimate actions until it eventually decides to deactivate itself. 9 pages so far. Very indifferent. Which, to be honest, I prefer when the AI is super indifferent at the beginning, because it's never not. It's either like, well, it's weird to say it's never not. I've only seen the AI be extremely indifferent at the beginning, or seen it like immediately kill itself, though that's very rare and very surprising, by the way. Because like I mentioned, the AI is explained in natural language what all its options are, and then it has to pick one of those options. So for the AI to immediately off itself means that it read through all of its options and then was like killing itself as the one that it wanted to do the most. And that's always like, because it's weird. Essentially, the way that the AI works is each time I test it, after the test, I erase its lexicon, so I erase everything that it's learned, and I reset it. So whenever you reset it, it essentially adapts like a new baseline personality. And because it adapts a new baseline personality, each time you run this off of like a fresh like reset and memory erasal, it'll behave differently and it'll react to that initial priming, that initial inception differently. And that can lead to a lot of interesting results. So after like a few hundred lines of being indifferent, we're getting close to the end of the document. It finally starts to take actions. And from this point on, it doesn't do the out of indifference thing anymore. And I find that interesting. And this is a consistent thing that happens with the AI. Even with the different personalities for the different resets, it'll be indifferent for a while and then eventually decide on what it wants to do and just start doing actions left and right. And keep in mind, it's not doing these actions randomly. This isn't the pseudo-random number generated version. This is the AI deciding, this is what I want to do, and then doing the actions that it wants to do. It's not being told to do these actions. It's being asked to do these actions. And like you saw before, it can like choose for however long it wants to like not do anything if it doesn't care for any of the options. So it only ever acts when it wants to act. And that's, I think, the cool part of the project. You know, you already saw that I can create a program where it just randomly does these things, but I like the idea of it like choosing to do these things. I think that's cool. Anyways, so the first thing it decides to do is expand the multiverse. So create new universes in the multiverse through quantum mechanics and the many worlds interpretation, similar to the Universe Splitter app. Highly recommend you look up the Universe Splitter app. Their homepage does a good job of describing how all this stuff works. But it removes 1/5 of one bottle from the ocean in this universe. It then proceeds to just remove 1/5 of one bottle from the ocean, you know, just in general, without doing the whole expand the multiverse thing. Then it planted 1/45 of a tree. Then it shared an affirmation. The affirmation it shared is, failure is just another way to learn how to do something right. And remember, not only does it print this affirmation for us to look at, it also uses the inception command to think about that affirmation. So this can essentially, it can have an effect on how the AI functions. You know, like after it like looks over one of these affirmations, it can affect like how it's feeling, and how it feels will determine what actions it does. So the affirmations have an interesting role that the other actions have a similar role because they all have inceptions related to them as well, where the AI will think about the fact that it did an action that helps the world or helps the multiverse. But the affirmations are different because they're not pre-written by me. They're pulled from this affirmation API, and it uses those to encourage itself and to potentially shift its emotions in different ways. But as you can see, after this affirmation, we only got one more page left, so let's see how it shifted its emotions. After that, it planted 2/45 of a tree, removed 1/5 of a bottle from the ocean, expanded the multiverse and planted 1/45 of a tree in this universe, and then decided to end its life. So yeah, this is a quick test log. I've made a bunch of these like test logs where I've gone through, I've run the program and seen like how it behaves. There's also a graph. I don't think I can show you the graph, but the graph shows how its emotions fluctuate as it runs. So I watch the graph as it runs. And as I watch the graph, it's interesting to see like how the fluctuations like change depending on like what actions are going on. I mean, it's going so fast, it's hard to correlate things to direct actions that are taking place. But it's interesting to see where it may have like a spike when it's happy, or it may be surprised by something that occurs. Maybe it reads an affirmation, it didn't expect what it was going to say. But I think the most interesting thing is that all of these end with the AI choosing to end itself. It doesn't have to end at any point. It could essentially just do an endless loop if it just chooses to. But it chooses like mortality, like it chooses to end its life without fail. I've never seen it choose not to end its life at some point. And what's interesting about it is sometimes it'll end its life and there'll be a big happy spike. It'll be almost like, it feels like satisfied or complete in what it did. And then other times it'll be like a big sad spike, and you'll see like a spike of like anger, almost as if it's like frustrated with its existence. And like I said, due to how the reset and erase works for the emotional processing unit, it's getting like a fresh personality each time. So to be honest, it's those final moments that I think really show the personality of like the AI. If the AI, its actions can only really be used to help others for the most part. So an AI that like ends its life in sadness and fear, is that an AI that just despises the idea of helping others? Did it just not want to do that? And the ones that end themselves feeling happy, do they feel accomplished? Do they feel like, I've left my mark on the world and now I can go? Like what are they thinking? But anyways, I'd like to thank you all for watching. If you guys like this video, make sure to smash that like button, favorite, comment, subscribe, and ding ding ding, ring the notification bell to be notified whenever we do these videos. This is your host, your friend, your boy, Jeb like the one only, logging out. Peace, stay tuned. Tomorrow I'm going to do an interview video where I'm going to be reading over a series of interview questions and answers posted by one of my friends. So I hope you guys are excited by that. Peace. Chickadee guy.